So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today. As others have noted, President Lincoln signed the Morrill Act in the midst of the Civil War, and it is worth remembering those precarious origins for all of our universities as we confront today a future for public higher education that seems to be reaching a critical turning point. From state divesting in public universities, to increasing anxiety over student loan debt, to disruptive technological change, to the growth and advancement of for-profit universities, to rising public skepticism of science and research, it's fair to say that the pressures on land-grant universities are the greatest that they have been in generations. And as the leaders and educators entrusted with our universities, how will we respond to these pressures? How can we follow in the footsteps of Lincoln and the Congress of 1862, rising above the immense problems of today to ensure that land-grant universities remain vital for tomorrow and indeed for the next 150 years? Here with us today are three panelists who I hope will help answer those questions. We're honored first to have the United States Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan. Nominated by President Barack Obama, Secretary Duncan has spearheaded President Obama's signature reform initiative, Race to the Top. In higher education, he has sought to boost the number of Americans graduating college through additional Pell Grants. He's advocated for reduced student loan payments for graduates in public service and has encouraged increased accountability measures for all universities. In an appearance on The Daily Show in February, Secretary Duncan told Jon Stewart, "We have to challenge the status quo. We have to take some risks and do things in very different ways." Well, today we hope Secretary Duncan will share with us some of his ideas and about the new approaches and the risks that are worth taking for higher education, and when he speaks in just a moment. We're also pleased to have the Chancellor of the State University of New York, Nancy Zimpher. Dr. Zimpher oversees the nation's largest comprehensive system of higher education with 62 campuses and 465,000 students. She is keenly interested in how virtual higher education will change the traditional college experience, surely a key question for this audience in this day. And last but certainly not least, we're pleased to have the Regents Professor at Montana State University and Curator of Paleontology at the Museum of the Rockies, Jack Horner. Mr. Horner is a highly regarded scientist and teacher whose personal struggles with dyslexia have prompted him to adapt his own methods of teaching and learning. As he describes it, "I seldom give a direct answer to questions, but rather answer questions with other questions." And as we ponder our future in higher education, I'm really looking forward to hearing his questions and hopefully some answers as well. The format for this afternoon is a little different. Secretary Duncan has another obligation this afternoon, so we're going to begin with his remarks, and following that, we will take questions from the audience for him. Then we will have Dr. Zimpher and Mr. Horner present their remarks, and then we will have, time permitting, a second conversation. So please join me in welcoming to the podium Secretary Duncan.
I have time. I'll stick around so you can do that first. Yeah. Okay. Well, good afternoon. I'm absolutely honored to be here with you today to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Morrill Act, which helped democratize education by creating our wonderful, wonderful state universities. And as all of you here know, it also led later to the creation of our HBCUs. Before we talk about that history, however, let me state a few current facts. Last year, over 40 states cut funding for higher education. In the last 2 years, obviously partly as a result of that, tuition at four-year public universities is up 15%. When 80% of our states cut funding to higher ed, I firmly believe we're cutting off our nose to spite our face and doing our young people and our nation a grave disservice. Meanwhile, 2 out of every 3 jobs in the future will require some kind of post-secondary education. but only about 41% of young people today have any kind of post-secondary degree. And then finally, 2/3 of bachelor degree graduates borrow for school and take out on average $26,000 in federal and private student loans. As folks here know, today student debt is approaching $1 trillion, more than all credit card debt combined. So, at a time when college has never been more important, it is also, unfortunately, it's never been more expensive. And it is increasingly at risk of being out of reach for far too many families and students and jeopardizing the American dream for more and more people. Something is radically wrong with that picture. The American dream is what inspired President Abraham Lincoln 150 years ago to sign the Morrill Act and help America become more economically competitive. Lincoln did this at a time of extraordinary national crisis. The nation was at war with itself. But Lincoln fundamentally understood that America was fighting for so much more than ending slavery or keeping the country whole. We were fighting for an idea of equality, not just in law, but in life. An idea that required equality of educational opportunity for the masses. And many of them were not even born here, but they came to this country because their countries could not provide a better life for them. And in the decades since then, the federal government has broadened the educational pathway to opportunity. We invested in vocational education post-World War I, in the GI Bill after World War II, and the Pell Grant program and student lending reforms of the current administration. And today, we all understand that education is the only viable economic strategy for America in a globally competitive economy. A strong military is about defense, but higher education is about offense and about competing successfully in the global economy, maintaining and enhancing our edge, our competitive advantage in fields like healthcare, technology, engineering, and science. And unfortunately, the brutal truth is that today, our education system is falling short in too many ways. Access to quality preschool programs, which helps to level the playing field and close achievement gaps, is too limited, especially for the low-income children who need it most. In K-12 education, a quarter, 25% of our nation's young people never finish high school. That's 1 million young people leaving our schools for our streets each year. And of those who do graduate from high school, far too few earn post-secondary degrees. And in higher education, completion rates are in single digits in some institutions and well below 50% for some entire sectors. Black and Latino students complete 4-year bachelor degree programs at a rate that is 50% lower than their white peers. There are exceptions to this. There are institutions out there like SUNY Albany that have virtually no attainment gap. That must become the norm rather than the exception. Billions and billions of dollars are spent by taxpayers and individuals each year, yet millions of young people don't have enough to show for that investment. No degree, and more important, no marketable skills. Today, in a tough economy, there's an estimated 3 million unfilled jobs in our country. And I continue to ask the question, do we have a jobs crisis or do we have a skills crisis? There seems to be a fundamental disconnect in the education marketplace today. Students are choosing the wrong schools or the wrong areas of study, and schools do not produce enough graduates who meet the demands of the new economy. The end result is unemployment or underemployment, with many well-educated people working in jobs that are neither professionally satisfying nor financially rewarding. And meanwhile, too many employers can't find the employees they're looking for with the right skills. This has to change. It has to change fast, and we all need to work together to challenge this status quo. We're trying to do more than ever before to support the investment in early learning and reform the K-12 system. But we must work equally hard with respect to post-secondary education, to keep college affordable for the middle class, to boost completion rates, and link young people to real and meaningful employment. Yesterday, we released data for the first time focusing on career colleges. It showed that the ratio of student debt to income and the rate of loan defaults are still too high in many places. The rates were only informational, but enforcement will begin next fall. Eventually, these career college programs will have to improve outcomes for students, or they will lose access to federal aid. Our taxpayer dollars must be used wisely. Now, part of the problem is a tough economy, but the biggest factor is out-of-control tuition costs and low-quality programs that are simply unaligned to the jobs of the new economy. So we're challenging career colleges, and in particular for-profit colleges, to get the vast majority of the revenue from federal student loans and grants to do a better job of holding down costs, supporting their students, and linking their graduates to good jobs that will allow them to pay off their loans. And we want to make the young people's investment of their time, their energy, and resources worthwhile. And today I want to challenge all of you, our land-grant colleges, to hold ourselves accountable to higher standards of transparency as one important step towards our collective effort of meeting President Obama's 2020 goal and once again producing the highest percentage of college graduates in the world. Several weeks ago, we met with the leaders of 10 large universities and state institutions, representing over 90 colleges across the country. Collectively, they agreed to make public how much 1 year of college will cost, financial aid options that clearly differentiate among grants and scholarships and loans, net tuition costs after grants and scholarships are taken into account, estimated monthly payments for federal student loans, and finally, data showing student results, including enrollment, graduation, and loan repayment rates. The following universities and systems all signed on: Arizona State University, Miami-Dade College, North Carolina Agriculture and Technical State University, the SUNY system led by Dr. Zimpher, Syracuse University, the University of Massachusetts system, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, the University System of Maryland, and the University System of Texas, and finally Vassar College. And as we move forward, we will release financial aid shopping sheets where students will be able to have all this information transparent and be able to compare across universities. And today, I'm hoping all of you will join us in signing on to these principles as well in order to help our students and families make better informed decisions about higher education. We don't want students and families taking on more debt than they need. We don't want them defaulting. And worst of all, we don't want them deciding that they simply can't afford to go to college. And today, unfortunately, that's becoming more and more a commonplace conversation for families. Just to tell you a quick story, I was in Iowa just a couple weeks ago, talked to a young girl who's a senior in college. This is not in a disadvantaged community. This is a middle-class area. She happens to have a twin brother. And she came up to me and said her family right then was trying to decide which twin to send to college, she or her brother. That's the kind of conversation that's happening in many, many families across the country today. No family should be in that kind of situation. And the fact is, as all of you know, there are low-cost options available to virtually everyone who wants to pursue their dreams of going on to higher education. Some of our better community colleges remain one of the best deals in public education. Some four-year public universities, such as the University of Maryland, have done a tremendous job of keeping tuition costs flat, even in these tough economic times. But others, unfortunately, haven't. Public colleges in Pennsylvania and New Hampshire have amongst the highest tuition in the nation. With room and board, some public universities cost upwards of $100,000 for in-state students to earn a four-year degree. Keeping costs down and boosting completion rates is a shared responsibility. None of us get a pass in this endeavor. Parents and students need to be smart shoppers, and students need to work hard and finish their degrees. As President Obama said in the State of the Union, when students quit school, they're not only quitting on themselves, they're quitting on their country. Institutions need to work harder to control costs, better support students, be creative with technology, make it easier to transfer without losing credits, and embrace three-year degree programs, competency-based degrees, and other approaches that get students across the finish line faster and without taking on too much debt. I recently met with a Stanford professor who taught an artificial intelligence course online to over 160,000 students across the globe. In fact, his 400 highest scoring students didn't go to Stanford. Today, many schools are putting their content online, both to generate revenue and to lower costs. You need to ensure that teaching doesn't take a back seat to publishing and research, both of which are absolutely important, but not at the expense of student learning. You need to look hard at the non-academic things that you're investing in that seem to make schools more appealing to 18-year-olds, but cost a lot and do not yield higher graduation rates. States have to step up, and states have to fund education. This is simply an investment in our future, and the last thing we should do in a tough economy is to put more pressure onto schools and onto students. And I'm meeting with our nation's governors in 3 weeks, and I'll be explicitly clear with them as well. I continue to ask, if budgets aren't just documents with numbers on them, but if budgets reflect our values, why is it okay that 40 states, 80% of the country, cut funding to higher ed, but they did not cut funding at that level to their corrections institutions? Do we prefer to lock people up at much higher costs or to invest in education and do the right thing on the front end? And finally, here at the federal level, we need to do a better job of helping people finish high school and get into college. And that's why we've worked so hard to simplify the FAFSA form itself, to streamline that, to simplify the lending process, and fund more Pell Grants. We're investing an additional $40 billion in Pell Grants over the next decade without going back to taxpayers for a nickel. And it's one of the accomplishments I'm most proud of. In fact, Pell Grant recipients are up from about 6 million young people in 2008 to over 9 million today, more than a 50% increase. And there are some very, very promising trends. For example, Hispanic college enrollment is up 25%. That's a huge step in the right direction. We have to make sure that 25% jump in enrollment rates increase to a 25% increase in completion rates at the back end. Finally, we're also pushing as hard as we can to keep interest rates down on federal staffer loans. And we're hoping that Congress acts this week. This week, it's Tuesday, so that means today, tomorrow, Thursday, acts right away to avoid an increase in rates, which are set to double July 1st. Now is obviously not the time to make college more expensive for our nation's hardworking families. So we are all in this together, and in order to meet our national goals, we need more people to complete. And one step you can take with little or no cost are to embrace these voluntary standards of transparency and empowers parents and students to make the right choices for them with a clarity of information that they have not had, that's been lacking for far too long. At the same time, let's strengthen the link between the classroom and the job site and make sure that a college degree not only has intellectual value by exposing young people to a broad range of learnings, but also has value in the marketplace. And finally, let's challenge ourselves to change and adapt to new technologies that will expand your reach and your impact so that more people can learn at lower costs. In doing so, I'm convinced we will reaffirm what Lincoln understood 150 years ago when he signed the Morrill Act and launched the transformation of higher education from a training ground for the elite to a pathway of opportunity for all Americans. We live in the greatest democracy in the world, and what makes us great is that everyone should have a chance. At the end of the day, the only threat to our democracy is ignorance, and the only answer is education. It is our collective job, you and I, all of us together, to make sure that every American who wants to better their lives through a higher education has that opportunity. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing from our panel now.
At the beginning, simply say he's graciously agreed to stay, and we're going to postpone.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. It's nice to see you. Good afternoon, everyone. I do want to tell you that the Secretary has agreed to stay, so we're going to speed on with the panel contributions and then have questions for the panel. There's going to be a lot of compatibility between what the Secretary offered up and what I think this organization can do to meet the expectations you have put on the table. I think Justin Morrill and Abraham Lincoln would have agreed with New York Times columnist David Leonhardt, who recently observed more educated people are healthier, live longer, and of course, make more money. Countries that educate more of their citizens tend to grow faster than similar countries that do not. Education, educating more people and educating them better, appears to be the best single bet a society can make. Public land-grant universities are America's single largest engine of human capital production and research and innovation. And without us, as Dan Fogel observes, America's post-war prosperity and power would have been unthinkable and unattainable. So there is no question the contemporary challenges of the early decades of the 21st century are what headlines are made of, and we have reviewed all of them in the last day and a half. Today and repeatedly, we've heard President Obama's call for reduced college costs and increased productivity in all that we do, and a stronger commitment to degree completion. The Secretary has called this sometimes the iron triangle of challenges that must be bent in the direction of bringing down our administrative and operational costs so that more of our funds can be invested in student services. In short, we must get down to business, making our sector more nimble, more accessible, more transparent, and yes, more efficient. Critics condemn this efficiency mentality as an attribute of business, one not appropriate for higher learning. But I think Jim Collins gave us an entire addendum correcting that view. He said we must reject the idea, well-intentioned but dead wrong, that the primary path to greatness in the social sector is to become more like a business. Most businesses, like most anything in life, have a desperate need for discipline. Disciplined people who engage in disciplined thought and who take disciplined actions. A culture of discipline is not a principle of business, he says. It is a principle of greatness. I think we have to remember that as we debate what people are telling us to do in the land-grant universities of the 21st century. We have to think about more rational tuition models that give our parents and students a 4 to 5 year window so that they can plan for the cost of college. And yes, we have to help support the President's and the Secretary's initiative, which is commonly called Know Before You Owe. This is that shopping sheet that the Secretary referred to, and frankly, aPLU is exactly the organization that could bring 100% commitment to the shopping sheet, Mr. Secretary. So getting down to business as 21st century land-grant institutions is an expectation whose time has come for our sector. But our greatest gifts to society remain in improving the quality of life among our citizens, increasing access and the distribution of a standard of living that closes once and for all the immense poverty divide in this country, and ensures that the best and brightest ideas get translated into a better economy and a better life for people in America and around the world. In each of our websites, we see great ambition and aspiration. Collins called this the big, hairy, audacious goals of our time. The kind of goals that will flourish in a democracy instead of countries riddled with poverty, illiteracy, and social unrest. But here is the dilemma. If we are the most preeminent higher education system in the world, producing more knowledge and innovation and educating more of our population than institutions in other countries, why is America still facing so many seemingly daunted and unsolvable problems? In short, what is the relationship between our magnificence and the problems of the world in which we live? One must ask, how can American higher education put its imprint on the most challenging problems of our day, as we have always done historically? Imagine aPLU and the seamless education pipeline. Given that education is the foundation for future success and quality of life, how can we stop the leaks in this education pipeline? Something on the Secretary's Twitter page that the College Board provided, a representation of 857 empty school desks, 850 students who drop out of school every hour in this country, every hour. We as an organization, as a system, as an entity, can and should do something about the leaks in our education pipeline. And imagine aPLU with its completion agenda serving the needs of that leaky education pipeline. Imagine aPLU in a healthier America, where our population is facing critical shortages in healthcare workers, too many children who come to school not healthy enough to focus and learn. A commitment we can make to put medical and healthcare professionals in the most needy communities of our country, something aPLU's urban serving universities are already committed to. And imagine aPLU and an energy-smart America where we commit ourselves collectively through the President's initiative on climate change to be smarter in our energy policy, to relieve the strains on households and businesses by a goal of bringing down our energy consumption and carbon footprint. These are three of the many audacious, ambitious goals that we ascribe to. But I want to go back to this vexing dilemma. If we are so good and so disciplined, why aren't more of our social problems getting solved? It may be because we are not approaching problem solving with the same discipline required to move this country from good to great, and perhaps more accurately, from great to premier. It's because we've not engaged in strategies supported by a report from FSG called collective impact. The idea that genuine change, real improvement on any social issue, requires a cross-sector commitment from a group of passionate and dedicated leaders who are willing to set aside their individual agendas and work together to solve specific social problems in which they share an interest. While the Land Grant Act was conceived as a decentralized set of institutional efforts, our commitment to some degree of intentional systemness, that the whole should be greater than the sum of its parts, might be a better guide for us in a revitalized land grant mission. This notion of collective impact is working in small communities around the country. My own experience in Cincinnati with the Strive Partnership has compelled over 80 communities around the country to invest in the concept of collective impact. This means that we are organized around a common vision, a common set of interventions, the use of evidence to determine which of these interventions will solve our social problems, and holding ourselves collectively to a set of metrics for which we can be responsible. So, for instance, in the Leaky education pipeline, the Secretary referred to the number of students who come to kindergarten not ready to learn. In our urban communities, that's 40 to 50% of all the young children who come to kindergarten. And we know that easily 25 to 30% of our students are not making it to the high school finish line. And we know the results of students who come to college underprepared for college and for career. So in order for us to impact on the education pipeline or the health needs of this country or energy conservation, we have to find systematic ways to work as a system of land grant institutions to focus on a limited set of social issues, to pool our resources to make sure that the interventions we are advocating are evidence-based, and to make sure that we hold ourselves to a standard of indicators and metrics for which we can be accountable in solving these big problems. Tom Friedman defined the flat world. Now he's talking about a world where we have the advantage to compete if we can just get our collective act together. I close with this. In a world where the biggest returns go to those who imagine and design a product, there is no higher imagination-enabling society than America. In a world where talent is the most important competitive advantage, there is no country that historically welcomed talented immigrants more than America. In a world in which protection for intellectual property and secure capital markets is highly prized by innovators and investors alike, there is no country safer than America. In a world in which the returns on innovation are staggering, our government funding on bioscience, new technology, and clean energy is of great advantage. If only we would come together on a national strategy to enhance and expand our natural advantages. More integration, most post-secondary education, better infrastructure, more government research, smart incentives for spurring millions of startups, and a long-term plan to really fix our long-term debt problems. Friedman says, nobody could touch us. We're that close. That, I think, can be the essence of the aPLU and land-grant mission for the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you. Integration, I like that. I should have brought a dinosaur bone. And I'm a little bit curious as to why I'm on this panel, since I do study dinosaurs. You're going to have to explain that. So it is ironic to me that I'm here. I mean, Mr. Gates almost graduated from Harvard, and I didn't even almost graduate from anything. So here I am. I study dinosaurs. Did I tell you that? Does anybody know what dinosaurs are? Do you remember dinosaurs when you were kids? Do you remember what they look like? Do you remember Velociraptor? Is there anybody here that didn't see Jurassic Park? Okay, well, that's going to help. So, Bill Gates said that science drives the economy, and I believe that's true. What baffles me is you people. You people baffle me. And I like the notion of land-grant colleges, and I like the notion of public schools. But what really confuses me is why there's such a separation between them. I mean, I can understand the separation for football games and things like that, but why are you so, I don't know, unintegrated? I don't understand that. And what more I don't understand is the whole business of school itself. We have K through something, K through 6, then we have middle school, then we have high school, then we have undergraduate college, and then we have graduate school, and everything's sort of packaged, right? So you can go from one to the other, you even get to graduate from one to the other. Why don't we integrate the whole thing? Public schools, land-grant schools. How come you're not part of a high school as well? How come high school isn't a part of you? How come a grade school isn't a part of you? How come you're not integrated? I don't understand that. You want kids to be interested in science? Integrate them into universities. Let them see what you're doing. So that's what I'm trying to do. Now, I have an easier chance than most of you do because I study dinosaurs. So I can actually do this. So I have this project. So I don't know whether you know it or not, but 6th graders would like to have a real dinosaur. And so would I. So we've started a project at Montana State University to, well, make a dinosaur. But, you know, dinosaurs, now this is information for you, right? Birds are living dinosaurs. Does everybody know that? If you didn't know that, learn it. Birds are living dinosaurs. So even though we can say that dinosaurs went extinct and we can say that the education system is kind of a dinosaur, it is kind of a dinosaur, but since birds are living dinosaurs, that's a good thing. It's a good thing that the education system is a dinosaur. You going for that? I know it's going to be hard for a lot of you to get that, but it is true. So our project right now is, a land grant school. We do agricultural, we do engineering, and we can make a dinosaur using those kinds of things. Chickens are birds. Does everybody know that? Chickens are birds. They're easy to come by in an ag school. And with a little engineering, you actually can make a dinosaur out of a chicken without, hurting the chicken. And it has to do with genetic engineering. And that's what we're working on. We're actually looking at what genes to turn on and turn off to make a chicken look like a velociraptor. Now, most kids would like a T-Rex, but I explained to them that we don't want them that big because they need to see Jurassic Park first. So anyway, we're working on this project. So it is an extremely integrative project. We are including kids in it. Kids can be part of this project. They can see how developmental biology works. They can see how engineering works. They can see how basically all of this stuff works. They can be part of the process of research. And they can do it by our technology, of course, integrative. So at the Museum of the Rockies where I work, we have the capability of reaching schools electronically. And so we are going to allow the kids in grade school and in high school to be a part of this project and watch how it goes and participate in it if they want to. So that's what I do. And my teaching method is a little different than most people's because I do want to include everyone. I want everyone to be interested in science. I want them to learn science. I want them to do science. And I don't want them to forget along the way when they graduate from one group or another. I want them to, in K through 6, know that high school and college are all part of the same land grant system. Thank you very much.
So while Jack's talking, I took my book out to make sure I knew the name of the session we were having here. But if you listen to all the things we've been talking about today, about why more young people aren't going into science and mathematics, how do we build this continuity in our... He's talking about what we're all about, the future of higher education. He just has an integrated approach to the future of higher education. So we have this wonderful opportunity because the lens is certainly wide open for the conversation now. We're going to do it a little differently than we did this morning. We have mics in the front of all rows, and I think the panelists would welcome a chance to engage. So let's have some questions from the audience.
Okay, well, first of all, Mr. Secretary, thank you very much for being here this afternoon. I really appreciated your talk, and I also want to thank our other two panelists who have very interesting ways of telling us how we need to rethink what we're doing. But I wanted to tell you that I'm on the executive committee of aPLU, that we are working very hard with the national database to develop a way of really reporting graduation rates correctly. And I hope that as you're thinking about this issue, we can work with you on that, because while it is, the tradition has been first-time freshmen in the same institution, which, as you know all too well, favors certain kinds of institutions and doesn't give public institutions like the one I represent, the University of Hawaii, any credit at all for doing what our state wants us to do and what we want to do, which is to move students through the pipeline from community colleges to graduation. And we have noted in the meeting we had today that when you look at known graduations, either within a system or at another institution, we're up to 70% or better graduations in institutions that had previously been considered to be 50% or under. So I think a good way to get us engaged is to help us make that the normative measure. So thank you.
Are you ready for another question?
We sure are.
Super. Thank you so much, all four of you, actually. My name is Noah Finkelstein from the University of Colorado Boulder. I'm a physics professor, very proud to be in the classroom with my students, where our students learn more and engage in a world-class research university. We take all of these missions very seriously. And in fact, they're coupled, this whole notion of education and practice. But it wasn't until programs like the American Physical Society's Physics Teacher Education Coalition came around, or the aPLU Science and Math Teacher Imperative, I love that it's an imperative, came around and told me, Noah, teacher recruitment and preparation begins in your physics class, for better or worse. Historically, for worse. I was teaching my students not to become teachers along the way. I didn't mean to, of course. But now that I'm aware of that is something that our disciplines take very seriously. My question is, and now what we're able to do is recruit more students from physics and partner with our schools of education to engage and to follow up on really all three of you had mentioned this idea of creating integrative programs. They should also be recursive integrating programs along the way, so that there's a great way for us to not only educate our current students and our future students, but then to seed this future cycle to create this continuum. So my question is, how do we institutionalize this as a national movement, not just from the aPLU, but from professional societies with the assistance and drive from the federal government?
First of all, I just appreciate your leadership and commitment so much. Let me go back to the first question. Getting the right data, being transparent around it, absolute common ground, want to do that. I always say there's no such thing as a non-traditional. I go to places, someone says I'm a non-traditional student. There is no non-traditional. The non-traditional is now the traditional. And so making sure we're not just looking at first-time, full-time, but looking at folks who are 28 coming back part-time and how they're doing it, 58 coming back part-time. So look forward to partnering that. On the STEM pipeline, happy to talk more offline. We're trying to put a huge amount of resources in that area. I worry that pipeline is, unfortunately, in many places broken. And we know so many of the jobs of the future are going to be in the STEM fields. Children, as you know, start to turn off of the STEM areas, often not in high school, but in 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th grade, when their teachers, frankly, lose their comfort level with the content. It's hard to instill a love of something when you don't fully understand the material yourself. So whatever we can do to get a lot more folks who love physics, who love chemistry, who love biology, not just graduating from your institution, but coming back and teaching, again, not just AP Physics, but in 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th grade. That, I think, is going to have a profound impact on young people in the country. We want to invest in those pipelines. We want to invest in those partnerships. Happy to talk about it more offline, but just as a dad, I have a 4th grader and a 2nd grader in a school that has a science focus. And to see how science is integrated across the curriculum, not just great classroom teachers, but in music, kids are singing about the planets and doing really creative things. It's remarkable to see the opportunity that my children are so blessed to have at a great public school. And the question is, how does that become the norm rather than the exception? And again, your commitment and bringing that next generation of talent in, we have to do it. We have to do it at a much earlier age than we ever have.
I wanted to add, I actually had a lot of appreciation, Jack, for what you were trying to say, because I really think we're still in parallel play. I don't really think universities have found an effective way to embrace relationships with elementary and secondary education and early childhood. We make policy in this country in that segmented way, and I think the Secretary's support for some kind of a crosswalk between how we talk about reform in elementary and secondary education has to go hand in glove with how we talk about reform in higher education. So I really think we do need to put our professors with faculty and early childhood educators. And I don't think that's something we can do globally. I think we have to do it locally. And Diana Nataluccio and the UT El Paso effort and what some other cities are doing around the country where typically the public university makes a commitment to the outcomes of the early childhood and elementary secondary sector owns the data, owns the number of STEM students or the number of students graduating successfully and going on to college is that's what I was talking about, a collective way to have more impact. But we're going to have to roll up our sleeves and get in those classrooms and be a partner with K-12, not someone who's just a receiver.
Gilbert Rochon, the president of Tuskegee University. And I would like to, first of all, express some appreciation for the role that Title III has played in our institutions. But what we're addressing on that K through 12 issue is actually through support of the National Science Foundation, which allowed us to, on the first instance, to establish a Center of Excellence in Nanobiomaterials, and secondly, to incorporate within middle schools throughout the multi-state Black Belt region a math teaching that requires the undergraduate portion to be a major in biology, chemistry, physics, or math. And largely because of the fact that my understanding is that 78% of math and science teachers at middle and high schools within this country do not have that credential. And as a result, teachers teach what they know, and we are measurably falling behind Asia, et cetera. So the question is, how can we form an alliance between the Department of Education, the National Science Foundation, Department of Agriculture in a way to address these issues in a more common, cohesive manner with the federal government?
No, it's a great question. I think it just goes back to Jack's point on this integration point. You talked a little bit sort of early childhood, K-12, higher ed. I would push obviously the integration side from the hard sciences and higher ed to the schools of education. Some places those groups are partnering, other places schools of education are an island unto themselves. They were not getting the talent coming in that we need in physics and math. We have to bring the resources of the entire administration behind this effort. We have to move outside our silos, and we've been historically, I think, part of the problem. And I can tell you unequivocally that Suresh and his team at NSF have been an amazing partner. Actually went over a couple weeks ago, did a town hall meeting with a couple hundred of his leaders there. We're working on an ongoing basis, whether it's Steve Chu at Energy or Tom Vilsack at Ed or folks in the White House, OSTP. I can say that we're working in a much better aligned fashion than ever before. If you see things falling through the cracks or you see us not moving in an integrated way, please let us know. But I think we have sort of one common enemy, which is academic failure, and one common goal of trying to do a much better job of producing the next generation of talent to come back into our nation's classrooms and instill a love of learning, a love of science and math and technology, starting at second, third, fourth, fifth grade. And we are collectively committed to doing that. And again, my partners and other agencies are working without ego, without worrying about silos or whatever, and just how do we get this done together. It's actually been very, very rewarding and refreshing.
Next question here.
Hi, my name's Joe Teal. I'm a student at Montana State University and a student regent in the Montana University system. And I found it interesting that, although it was mentioned on the panel, we haven't talked a lot today about the change between traditional and non-traditional students, that the trend is that we're having more and more non-traditional students, and fewer of the people we're actually enrolling are coming from the pipeline. We're getting a second chance at these people that have already leaked out. So I was wondering if the panel could expand on how this is going to change or should change how we deliver higher education and how we encourage and take advantage of this second chance.
Well, just quickly on the numbers, just so folks understand the scale of the problem, if we're trying to have a 50% increase in the number of college graduates between now and 2020, some portion of that has to come from folks coming right out of high school. But a large percent of that has to come from what you call non-traditional. Again, that to me is a sort of an obsolete term. And we have over 90 million Americans, adults, who are undereducated. And so that's the population we have to bring back in. And so I try to talk about some of the things, whether it's easier to transfer credits between institutions, whether it's more access to classes online, We have some community colleges now that are literally offering classes 24/7. They're open 24/7. Folks working 1, 2, 3 jobs trying to take the next step up the economic ladder. So how we bring these folks back in, how we support them. Many are single moms raising families, trying to work, trying to make a living. How we become much more flexible and innovative and help create a pipeline where, again, it's not just, I think we've had a great focus on access. I'm frankly really, really proud of what we've done on the access side. I don't think we've done enough on the completion side at any level. 2 years, 4 years, traditional, non-traditional, whatever you want to do. We want to move the conversation there. Who's doing a great job with first-generation college goers, Pell Grant recipients, the 38-year-old mother of 3 coming back to school, trying to take some classes? How do we make sure they not just get in the door, but get out the back end and walk across the stage?
Unfortunately, we're going to have one more question from the head of our executive committee. The secretary has to move on, and I think we're going to end the panel here a little early. So, Gene?
Yeah, Gene Block. I'm Chancellor at UCLA, and what I'm interested in is that, as we recognize we need more math, science competency in our high schools and teachers. Has the administration thought about supporting perhaps the uncapping of H-1B visas to allow international teachers to come in, at least until we have enough citizen teachers?
Yeah, no, it's a really thoughtful question. It doesn't make sense to me where we sort of bring this talent into the country and then we send them back to their own countries and don't benefit from that. So those are conversations we need to continue to have. Janet Napolitano is really, really thoughtful on this. And you have so many folks who come here, do well, want to stay, want to contribute, and to deny them the opportunity is a little counterintuitive.
So let's have a nice round of applause for the secretary, for Nancy Zimpher, and for Jack Horner. Thank you all for being with us tonight.